Greetings, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. This being the first episode of the year 2014 and for Season 4. I can't believe that we are already on episode 68. It seems like just yesterday this show got started, and we've come a long way. Over the last couple of years, we have talked to people who have had UFO sightings, people who have captured UFOs on videotape. We've talked to abductees. We've talked to people about disclosure and many other side topics of this wacky world of ufology. Tonight, we have probably the most important guest that I can think of. I have been wanting to have this gentleman on the show for 2 years now, and I can't believe that it's finally come true. That person I'm talking about is Mr. Stanton T. Friedman, my mentor, and I know probably the mentor for thousands upon thousands of other people that have decided to get into ufology. I think anyone that has even scratched the surface of ufology knows of Mr. Friedman and the work he has done over the last, I don't know, half century or something like that. And as I was preparing for tonight's show, it became quite obvious that I was not going to be able to ask him every question that I had. We would be here for days. So tonight, we're going to be focusing in on what I refer to as the 3 4s. And if any of you have been on Mr. Friedman's website, you may know what I'm talking about. Basically, we're going to be looking into three sections, if you will. Number 1 is Mr. Friedman's 4 major conclusions. Next will be the 4 major rules for debunkers. And then lastly, the 4 major reasons why the big names in science and journalism haven't jumped on the pro-UFO bandwagon. And I think that should probably give us a good generic overview of what Mr. Friedman is all about. After that, we're going to be talking about SETI. And then we're going to also have a viewer question that we'll be talking about. And then to close things up, we'll be talking about some upcoming events that Mr. Friedman has on his calendar. So don't go away. This is definitely one episode you'll want to watch all the way through. So get comfortable. We'll be right back with Mr. Stanton T. Friedman.
Off into space. Man, that takes real teamwork. And here's a team of junior spacemen with an out-of-this-world breakfast that teams up V8 juice and Cheerios for flavor and energy. What a treat! A flavorful glassful of refreshing V8 juice and Cheerios with power protein, plus vitamin B1 for Go Power. And now, here's a special out-of-this-world free offer. This moon rocket kit, both a toy and an exciting game. First, blast off. It separates in midair and lands 2 spacemen on a moon map. You get this wonderful game only through this free offer. Send your name and address and 1 V8 label plus 1 box top from these specially marked packages of Cheerios, Kix, or Frostios to Moon Rocket Kit, Mount Vernon 10, New York. Get Campbell's V8 cocktail vegetable juice with any one of these Big G cereals.
Welcome back, everyone. I was just thinking during break, if there is such a thing as a celebrity ufologist, our guest tonight would be one of those people. If for anyone that has even scratched the surface of ufology, you know this gentleman's name, you've seen his work. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the show Mr. Stanton T. Friedman. Stan, are you out there?
I'm here in beautiful downtown Fredericton, New Brunswick, where it's cold. That's in Canada, you understand.
Now, I just found out that you spent part of your life at the beach in Southern California, kind of where I'm from. How did you make that transition? That must have been a little shock to the system.
Well, not really. I grew up in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
But my wife is from New Brunswick, and she's got 8 siblings, and 6 of them live here. And so we came from the West Coast, and our kids had no family out there. We came here. They got grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. Family reunions have about 65 people. So it's been great. And I've never regretted the move. We've lived here 28 years, I guess. And great place to raise a family. Beautiful Fredericton. It's the capital city of New Brunswick, and it's the home of the University of New Brunswick, which is the oldest English language university in Canada.
Is that right?
1787. And we also are on the Bay of Fundy, New Brunswick is, which has the world's highest tides. And so, it's been interesting living here, and what a contrast between here in New Jersey. I went to school in New Brunswick, New Jersey for 2 years at Rutgers. And New Jersey has roughly 8 million people and 8,000 square miles, and New Brunswick up here has 750,000 people and 30,000 square miles. So 1/40th of the population density.
Well, I
Makes
tell
a difference.
Yeah, and I spent the first 35 years of my life in California, and no disrespect to the people that live in California now, but California just isn't what it used to be. I would never move back there unless I absolutely had to, but living out in a little more open space is nice, especially as you get older, right?
Well, yeah, it is. And, I had somebody call me from California. What are you doing back there, Stan? Don't you miss California? Well, it took me a while to get used to not having earthquakes and drive-by shootings and miserable smogs and terrible traffic, but I learned to do without those things. That ended the conversation.
Yes, the fires, the mudslides, the earthquakes, and you can have it. You can have it. Stan, you've been involved now in ufology for so many years. You've done countless television shows, radio shows, and when you travel, going to your speaking engagements and stuff, do you get recognized a lot? I mean, do people come up to you out of the blue when you're walking down the halls at the airport and want to say hello?
Well, at airports is the most likely place where I'll be recognized. That has happened a number of times, whether walking or sitting reading a book or waiting for a plane, Yes, people do recognize me, and they're always nice and pleasant and so forth. And, along those same lines, some people think, if you say they're flying saucers, then you must be a nut and you get laughed at. Well, I've had 11 hecklers in over 700 lectures. And I'm told you'll get more than that if you talk about sports, religion, or politics. And by the way, 2 of those 11 were drunk. So I really have enjoyed the response that I've gotten. And I've had a couple of people recognize me by my voice, which was kind of a surprise.
Well,
standing in line behind me or something and, asking me afterward, are you Stanton Friedman? Yes.
Well, now, do most of them want to tell you a story about a sighting they saw or something?
A lot of them do, because they're afraid to speak out. And one of the things I've been trying to do for years is lift the laughter curtain, as I call it. Like the Iron Curtain cut down communication east-west. I guess people still remember that. Mm-hmm. There's been a laughter curtain. And when I check my audiences after my lectures, as I often do, typically 10% believe they have seen a flying saucer, but 90% of those people didn't report what they saw. And the biggest reason for not reporting is they think I was some kind of a nut. Well,
Yeah.
I have to tell you that most people are quite willing, ready, and able to entertain the notion that some flying saucers are alien spacecraft. They may not want to admit it publicly. That's another story. But it is not a noisy, the world is not full of nasty, noisy negativists. There's a small group of those, and they have big voices in the academic world, if you will. But it hasn't been difficult for me. And now, admittedly, I've designed my lecture. Look, I'm a nuclear physicist. I was in high school debating. I learned an important lesson in the 5th grade. Our teacher, Rose Gutkin, I don't think of her very often, but she was telling us how the solar system, the sun stands still and the planets move around the Earth. And I spoke up and said, "No, Miss Gutkin," this is in 5th grade, mind you. I just read in the encyclopedia that the whole system, the whole solar system, moving around the center of the galaxy at 12 miles a second. And she gave me a hard time, which was unusual. Teachers didn't usually give me a hard time. So I didn't complain, but the next day I brought in the encyclopedia, and she reluctantly admitted that, well, maybe that's the way it was. Well, the lesson I learned is have facts in hand before putting mouth in gear. And it helped in debating in high school, and it helped on the lecture circuit. And what I found was, until recently at least, I had a very good memory, could depend on the facts to come up at the right time in the question and answer period and stuff when people wanted to know stuff. And I find that it's gratifying the way people respond, and they appreciate the fact that I use facts to make my case rather than proclamations.
Right.
It's an old lesson, but when you work in industry, you got a boss, and he's got a boss, and if you submit a paper to the American Nuclear Society, everybody's got to approve it. And so you better do things properly. You can't just flail about with accusations one way or another. It doesn't matter. And I just wrote a column. I write a monthly column for the MUFON Journal, Mutual UFO Network. And I just wrote one. I usually am attacking the nasty, noisy negativists and the debunkers and the SETI cultists and all that stuff. SETI stands for Silly Effort to Investigate, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. No, they're not interested in extraterrestrial intelligence. So it's not. I just did a column in which I pointed out the failures of some of the positivists. The people say, "Oh yeah, flying saucers are real," but some of their reasoning is not very good either, and they don't have the facts. And and it's funny. There are a couple of things that both groups have in common. They don't know anything about how security works. They don't know anything about interstellar travel, advanced technology, and most of them don't know much about the large-scale scientific studies. They want to look at one case at a time and think of the nuttiest one they can if they're the disbeliever, and they know one good case. They've read Kathy Martin and my book, Captured, for example, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO case. Mm-hmm. They've heard about Roswell. But they don't realize that, there are thousands of good cases out there. So that I sort of take them by the hand and try to lead them in the right direction. But I'm an equal opportunity debunker of debunking on either side of the fence.
Well, I was looking at your website, and the page that really caught my eye was the page that went over what I call the 3 4s of yours, and the first being your 4 major conclusions, and I take it that those are still
Yes.
true, right?
Yeah.
The first one being that the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Most are not. And I guess that follows the 90-10 rule that's been in place for a while.
Well,
Or around there.
the kicker here is you got to ask the right questions. If you're a basketball coach, you know darn well that 98% of the people aren't 7 feet tall. You don't say, well, I guess there's no point in my trying to find anybody. You say, give me one 7-footer. As a nuclear guy, most isotopes aren't fissionable. Fortunately, some of them are, but even then, uranium, 99.3% of the atoms of uranium that occur in Mother Nature are not uranium-235. But you learn if you want to build a reactor, that's what you get, and you go to all kinds of trouble to separate it and enrich it and so forth, even though it's such a tiny fraction. So you could take the negativist attitude, well, most sightings can be explained, therefore all can be.
Yeah.
That's stupidity.
Right.
That makes no sense. You ask a doctor, well, isn't it true that most chemicals won't cure disease? Of course it's true. But so what? If you're sick, give me the one that will. What do I care about the ones that won't? So it's a question of attitude. And I learned that pretty quickly. I was in radiation shielding. And it's enormous for compact, high-performance, exotic, classified nuclear reactors. I learned very quickly that you really have to be careful to pick out what matters and what doesn't matter, and get the variation in characteristics of elements is enormous. Two isotopes of the same element, one can have more than 1,000 times the probability of capturing a neutron than the other. So you learn to focus on, let's get the facts straight and right. So that's the first rule. When I say that some are extraterrestrial, we're dealing with reports, photographs, radar observations, etc., of things that certainly are manufactured. They're not just a balloon or a balloon's manufactured, but I mean they're manufactured and behave in ways that things we can build here on Earth don't behave. In other words, right-angled turns, silent, vertical, and rearward flight, a whole bunch of these characteristics that say, hey, if we could build things like that, we would, and we haven't. We'd use them in war. That's what we build advanced propulsion systems for.
Absolutely.
And we have had lots of wars, and we haven't used anything like that. So it came from someplace else. Now, it doesn't answer the question, where from, why, how, any of those questions. But it says they're not from here.
Right.
That's a very important conclusion. Now, admittedly, I lucked out. Kepler came along, and now everybody knows that there are planets all over the place out there. It's really kind of funny how at one point Frank Drake was saying there might be as many as 8,000 places in the galaxy that could send messages. Well, isn't that impressive? Well, there's over 100 billion stars in the galaxy, and the best thinking now is overall, based on the Kepler findings of planets all over the place, that on the average there's one planet per star. Some might have 5, some might have none, but 1 per star. That means maybe 100 billion planets in the galaxy. That makes 8,000 look like a very small number.
Very, very small.
Yeah, so that's the first conclusion, and it's very straightforward. Now, admittedly, I use 5 large-scale scientific studies and present the facts from those studies when I talk on the stage usually. And I've checked my audiences, and typically maybe 2% have read any of them. So that's my first job, is to educate them, not one case at a time, but look at compilations. That's what's impressive. After Ted Phillips has collected 5,000 physical trace cases from 80 countries, after you've read your first 200, you don't need more than that to say, look what's going on all over.
Something ain't right here. Yeah. Well, let's move to number 2 here, Stan. Number 2 says, the subject of flying saucers represents a kind of cosmic Watergate. And I've heard you use that phrase before, cosmic Watergate. So tell us about that.
Well, okay, that I'm old enough to remember when Watergate happened.
Right.
Political Watergate. And the kicker is we're dealing with central government restrictions on distribution of data. Government was covering up. Nixon was covering up in that case. And the kicker here is that most people don't understand how security works. I worked under security for 14 years. And I do understand. I wrote classified documents. I've been to archives and looked at classified documents and so forth. And the thing is, it's very easy to prove that the government's been covering up about flying saucers. For example, the National Security Agency, and now everybody knows what that is, not just never says anything or no such agency, which is what they used to think, thanks to Mr. Snowden. The NSA released years ago 156 top secret Umbra UFO documents. The only trouble is pages of documents about flying saucers, UFOs, if you will. But you could read one sentence per page. Everything else was whited out.
Yeah.
And they used whiteout instead of blackout because they didn't like my showing blacked out documents on television. I found that out. I called because I'd heard they were issuing the documents finally instead of withholding them. And when I gave her my name, "Oh, I know who you are," she said. And I'm wondering, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out Philip Klass, the nasty, noisy negativist of the last century, had called them and told them Friedman shows those documents, and he doesn't tell everybody that it's all. The only reason you can't read everything is that it's sources and methods information. And of course, normally I do on television, but so they knew who I was, and they released them all whited out, except one sentence per page. The CIA, you can get dozens of top secret Umbra documents that are blocked out, indeed. And you can read 6 words here, 8 words there, and they're not covering. I had people call me when the NSA did its thing. "Stan, they're releasing the data. They're not covering up anymore." I said, "Can you read under the whiteout or the CIA's blackout?" "Well, no." "Well, then they're not releasing the data." And a third arrow in the gut of the debunkers about security and stuff is what was said by General Carol Bolender. He was given the job. He had nothing to do with UFOs. He was an engineer, worked on the lunar excursion module. He was asked in 1969 to figure out a position for us about Project Blue Book, which was supposedly the only government study dealing with UFOs way back in the 50s and 60s. And he had worked on a lunar excursion module. He was an engineer. He had nothing to do with Blue Book. But he was a brigadier general, and so he wrote a memo in October of 1969 that resulted in the closing of Project Blue Book. And in this memo, he said, quote, "Moreover, reports of UFOs which could affect national security are made in accordance with JNAP, Joint Army Navy Air Force Publication 146, or Air Force Manual 55-11, and are not part of the Blue Book system," which is an astonishing statement because supposedly that was the only system and it didn't matter whether it had anything to do with security or not. 2 paragraphs later, he said, "If we close Project Blue Book, the public won't have a place to report a UFO sighting. However, as previously noted, reports which could affect national security will continue to be investigated using the procedures designed for that purpose," unquote. Now, I managed to locate General Bolender 10 years after the memo came out. I didn't know about it then. And he agreed with me when I said, "It sounds like you got a 2-track system here. The reports that could affect security, say a saucer goes down the runway at a SAC base, Strategic Air Command base, where nuclear weapons are stored. That's a national security problem. There's not supposed to be anybody there, aside from our guys." And he said, yes, there's those, and then the ones, the run-of-the-mill reports. MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, gets 600 reports a month.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get most of the reports that affect national security because that data is born classified. The big radar systems and fighter planes chasing UFOs and using gun cameras and satellite data and all that sort of thing. So, but no major media group has taken on the challenge to tell us the straight truth about flying saucers, unfortunately. And, even there's a terrible example, the New York Times. When the Air Force published its second report on Roswell, 1997, and the first one said they weren't going to say anything more. That was the Roswell report Truth versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert. They supplied the fiction. They lied about me in there, and I don't like that. But anyway, they said we're not going to say anything more about UFOs. That was in 94. 97, they put out the second volume. UFO Report, Case Closed. And they gave the worst explanation that I have seen for Roswell. Stories about bodies were the result of the distribution dropping from airplanes and balloons and stuff, crash test dummies all over New Mexico. And they showed the same map 3 times showing all the places where they dropped. Of course, none of them were near the 2 UFO crashes that occurred at the same time. And more important, they didn't bother to say, this is front page, New York Times, above the fold on a Sunday. You can't get better placement of a story than that. And unfortunately, they neglected a couple of facts. I found the guy who was in charge of that study dropping crash test dummies. The 2 most significant things were that for the test to be meaningful, the dummies had to look like pilots. They were 6 feet tall and 175 pounds. How do you get that down to a 4-foot-tall guy with a big head? Even more intriguing, none of them were dropped before 1953. Roswell was 1947. So we got time travel for crash test dummies. Now, I located the man in charge of the program, Colonel Madsen. He's dead now, too, unfortunately. Why didn't the New York Times talk to him? He wasn't hard to find. So, I do get upset about the cover-up by the good guys, if you will. There is a cosmic Watergate, like it or not.
I tell you, it's mind-boggling to even think about. Where is the truth? Somebody must have it, right? A certain few.
I presume several somebodies. What people don't realize, about 5 weeks ago, there was an article in the paper saying that the black budget for this coming year was now estimated, gone up about 3%, was only going to be $50 billion. That's a budget not accountable to Congress for. $50 billion. And yet, we have astronomers in particular saying governments can't keep secrets. Dr. Tyson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, head of Hayden Planetarium, very prominent, very sharp astronomer, he gave a talk in which he said that the proof that the government can't keep secrets is how much we know about President Clinton's genitalia. What a great line. Totally irrelevant to the question, of course. I didn't hear anything about the NSA, the CIA, and all that whole alphabet soup, OSI, ONI, there's a whole bunch of these intelligence agencies. An equally silly remark was made by Dr. Seth Shostak of the SETI Institute. He said the proof that the government can't keep secrets is how bad a job FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association, did on Katrina and how badly the post office operates.
Yeah.
What's that got to do with the
I don't know.
CIA, et cetera? It's a stupid remark, quite frankly.
Stan...
I've debated him, so I'm not not telling secrets out of class. He knows what I think. He's heard my lectures. He hadn't read my book. He said he had it on his nightstand after I sent it to him. But
Stan, I think it was just last night I saw a report on the evening national news, Channel 7, I believe, ABC. And somebody just come out with a new book, but it talks about these people that 40 years ago broke into an FBI office and stole some information regarding illegal tactics that the FBI was using during the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. And these things have been a secret since then. So, and that's, just civil rights and anti-war. can they hold secrets? I believe they can. And
Well,
especially...
there's a difference between national security in that sense. That's why I stress that I worked on classified programs. I probably set a record for working on more canceled government-sponsored classified programs than anybody. That's the way it worked out. It wasn't my intention to do so. But, and, you know, part of that is there are people who will tell you that on the Majestic 12 documents, well, surely those guys would have told their wives what they were doing. Absolutely not.
No.
I never told my wife anything classified. It'd be a stupid thing to do, besides in violation of the law. I agreed not to release classified information to anybody who didn't have an appropriate clearance and need to know. Very simple. And, you know, you don't want to lose your job. You might be prosecuted as well. So I don't know anybody who worked on these programs who told their wife classified stuff. And also, you know, the academic community doesn't seem to understand that there's an awful lot of research that goes on outside of academia, as amazing as that might sound. I had two people tell me, Stan, if Roswell really happened, they'd have had to pull all the professors of physics out of the colleges. Well, they really said half the professors. I said, you got to be kidding. There are loads of highly classified laboratories where very competent and highly cleared people work. Think Los Alamos, think Oak Ridge, think Hanford, think, you know, well, when I was working for General Electric on nuclear airplanes, 1958, we spent $100 million and employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. We're not talking about 6 professors and 12 grad students, for goodness sakes. And most of these guys have no idea of that. So security is an area where they are particularly weak. And most of them have... Oh, I had one guy who had been a Kent Jeffrey. He was a pilot who touted Roswell. Then he found he'd been misled by one of the key witnesses. So he talked to former pilots from Roswell and from Wright-Patterson. None of them told him anything about Roswell. It must not have happened. Well, he never had a security clearance in his life. If any of these guys knew something, they certainly going to tell him.
Yeah.
You know, so it's crazy. So and the fourth area is the area of advanced technology for deep space travel. Again, partly because it isn't developed generally in academia. The nuclear navy, for example, first nuclear submarine, 1956, done by Westinghouse, places like that. And it wasn't too long. Well, it took a few years, but how many of these guys, the noisy negativists, realize that we have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers that can operate for 18 years without refueling? 18 years. That's a lot of gas stations missed on the way out for the aircraft carriers. And, you know, they look at me like I've been smoking the wrong stuff. But that's the real world.
Yeah.
And I worked on a study of fusion propulsion. That's my key system that I want everybody to know about. Just about all the energy in the universe is produced by nuclear fusion. That's what happens in the stars. And every advanced civilization knows that. We just learned. We first thought about it in 1938. We tested our first H-bomb fusion device in 1952. It only released the energy of 10 million tons of TNT. One bomb. And the Russians outdid us a few years later with one that was 57 million tons of TNT, energy release equivalent. I mean, where are these guys hiding themselves? Aren't they aware of this? And all the astronomers know that fusion's what goes on in the stars. You know, they don't know about the classified programs, apparently. Too bad, guys, but that's the way it is.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so there are 4 areas, or several areas in which they are ignorant, but try to act as if they are knowledgeable. And, you know, I co-authored a book with Kathleen Marden, Betty Hill's niece. We've done 2 of them captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. And we did one, Science Was Wrong. The original title was going to be, It's Impossible, Isn't It? The answer would have been no. There are 14 chapters. We each did 7. And in every instance, the key thing is that some smart guy said something stupid. And we really should do a second volume because there are a lot more examples. But just to pick one at random, the best-known astronomer in the United States, Dr. Simon Newcomb, made the statement that if there was one thing he was sure of, man would never fly any distance in a vehicle. This is 2 months before the Wright brothers' first flight. The English astronomer Royal in 1956, a year before Sputnik. Space travel is utter bilge, he said. What good would it do? Who's going to spend the money? What we need is better equipment for astronomy. And who benefited most from the space program in terms of scientific fields? Astronomy, of course, with the Hubble and Kepler and all the rest. So you got to be really careful, but about listening to people talking about things about which they know nothing, but where they've impressed themselves with their degrees as somebody who should know something and can get away with talking about things about which they know nothing.
And the public seems to see those type of people on TV and radio and
oh, yeah.
do exactly what you just said. Oh, he's a PhD. He must know,
Yeah.
or whatever.
It's mind-boggling. And you see, I can do all this because I don't have a PhD. What do you need to have a piled higher and deeper degree for? My title in industry, my job title was nuclear physicist. That was good enough for me. And that's little companies like GE, GM, Westinghouse, TRW Systems, Aerojet General Nucleonics, etc. So I am not a quiet voice, but I can give you specific examples of where these guys go astray. And somebody has to stand up and say the emperor doesn't have any clothes. Look, my University of Chicago classmate, Carl Sagan, we were in the same classes for 3 years. I wish he were still around, but he's not. We're the same age. He has publicly stated twice that there are interesting sightings that aren't reliable. There are reliable sightings that aren't interesting. But there are no interesting and reliable sightings. Sounds profound. Does he give a reference? No. Is it true? Absolutely none.
Yeah. Good soundbite. Good soundbite.
Yeah, it's a good soundbite. The biggest study ever done for the United States Air Force showed that the better the quality of the sighting, the more likely to be unexplainable. 21.5% of the 3,201. We're not talking about 36 sightings. We're talking over 3,000 of the cases finally given a rating by scientists at the Battelle Memorial Institute under Air Force contract. 21.5% were listed as unknowns, and 35% of the best cases. And yet, in the press release, this is in the mid-50s, the Secretary of the Air Force, mind you, said on the basis of this report, they didn't give the title of the report, Blue Book Special Report 14, because some newsman would certainly have said, what do you mean 14? What happened to 1 through 13? They were all classified, of course. What they found, what the Secretary of the Air Force claimed was found, was that on the basis of this study, we believe no objects such as those properly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. Even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available. Well, that took care of it. The only trouble is when you look at the report, the unknowns weren't 3% or 6 or 12. They were 21.5%, and they were completely separate from the 9.3% that were listed as insufficient information. That showed up in newspapers across the country. Total lie by the Secretary of the Air Force. It's one of the things that really got me started digging into ufology, because I don't like being lied to. When you have a clearance, you sometimes have to tiptoe around the truth.
Right.
But blatant lying like that For those people who are saying, I don't believe what he's saying, check out my website at www.stantonfriedman.com, and you'll find a listing for Project Blue Book Special Report 14. You can have your own copy with its 200-plus tables, charts, graphs, maps. But don't let them bamboozle you with the nonsense.
Well, I think, one of the main reasons you are so liked, Stan, is because you do deal with the facts and just the facts, as Jack Webb used to say.
Yes.
Just the facts, ma'am. And as I told you, a lot of the people that watch this show are like me and semi-newbies. We might have been into this for 2-3 years, and it's very hard to get through all that quagmire of noise and untruths and everything else, and to focus in on just the facts, because some of those untruths, they're much more exciting sometimes, they're much more colorful, but they're not facts.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's right. And, it's aggravating, the stuff that gets passed on time after time. That's baloney.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder that I won the debates with Dr. Seth Shostak. I was on Coast to Coast Radio for 3 hours in the middle of the night for me, because I'm 4 hours ahead of California, where I live here. In the Atlantic time zone, we have our own. And we did a debate, and I got 57% of the vote, and he got 33, and 10% said, I don't know who won. And then Michael Shermer of the Skeptic Society, Dr. Michael Shermer, we debated, and I got 90% of the vote.
Wow.
Because he didn't know anything.
Yeah.
He hadn't done any homework. That's the general rule.
When I see these quote-unquote debunkers, I've seen them on the Larry King, which I believe you were on as well.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but they're pulling things out of their rear end, Stan, and they try to utilize them as fact, and I guess they feel enough people will think they're telling the truth, or I don't know. I don't know what they think. Do they think they're being smart?
In Shermer's case, he was asked right off the bat by George Noory, what was his take on this whole thing. Well, he said, it's very straightforward. With all these strange phenomena, there's a residue effect, 5%, whether it's ghosts or UFOs. And the only reason those things can't be explained is that there isn't enough data. Very simple. Now, I immediately rattled off 5 large-scale scientific studies, including Blue Book Special Report 14. Even the Condon Report, 30% of the 117 cases studied in detail could not be identified, according to a special UFO subcommittee of the world's largest group of space scientists, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And I rattled off 3 more, and it was downhill from there. Because he didn't know anything. He just presumed, well, if there was anything to be known, he'd know it.
He'd know it, yeah. Unbelievable.
And so I'm willing to take anybody on. Right now I'm challenging Dr. Tyson. They've written a couple of columns in the MUFON Journal, because not only did he speak out about the cover-up using what we know about President Clinton's genitalia as an example of governments not keeping secrets, which is utterly absurd, but he went on the technological route, too, on the Peter Jennings mockumentary, as I call it, February 24th, 2007, I think it was. He used as an example of the impossibility of interstellar travel. He said our fastest craft, spacecraft, would take 70,000 years to get to the nearest star if it was headed in the right direction, which it isn't. And we scientists like to get our data sooner than that. That sounds very profound. The only trouble is the system he was talking about has no propulsion system on it. It's been coasting since it left the Earth. That's like saying you throw a bottle in the ocean. That'll tell you how long it takes to cross the ocean, or a balloon in the air. I mean, it's utterly absurd. And I've worked on fusion propulsion and so forth, and but how can they try to get away with it? So I'm trying to challenge him to a debate. He doesn't do debates, I'm told, and but maybe we'll get him out in the open somewhere. People like that need to have the fallacies of their reasoning exposed.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a right to keep secret the fact that they don't know what they're talking about, in other words, which is my job. Make sure you understand that, folks. And, even the pro-UFO people don't know a lot about propulsion systems, I must say this.
Well, no.
It's one of the, just to give you a piece of information, I've asked, when I do science colloquia at colleges, sometimes in the afternoon, and I hear from a student that Professor Jones said he was going to show how unscientific you were. So I play a little game. I talk about something and ask, you all know about the electromagnetic submarine. Of course they don't know. And the nuclear-powered carrier and fission rockets. And once we've established that their professors don't know everything, then I play a little game. What's the numerical value of 1G acceleration? 9.8 meters per second squared, everybody knows. I say, well, how do you relate that to a Corvette? They look at me like I'm talking Swahili. And I don't know how to talk Swahili. Well, a good unit is 21 miles per hour per second. That's 1G acceleration. Okay, then I ask him, what's the speed of light? 300,000 kilometers per second. That's true, but how do you relate that to the real world? Well, it turns out the right number is like 670 million miles an hour. Now, the real question is, how long does it take at 1G to get to the speed of light? And it's a multiple choice question, folks. I say it's 1,000 years, 100 years, 10 years, or 1. How many think it's 1,000? How many think it's 100? An awful lot think it's 1,000 or 100 or 10. The right answer is 1. 1 year at 1G to get to the speed of light. And they want half an Einstein. Einstein said not only that the speed of light's a limit, but he also said as you get close to the speed of light, time slows down for things moving that fast, which sounds crazy, but that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's been measured. It's been detected. That's not just a theory. But they want to forget that. Well, at 99.99% of the speed of light, you can get 37 light years in just a few months, pilot time. You go out, come back, marry your granddaughter's best friend. It's a gift of immortality. You can't leave that out of the picture.
Yeah.
And, to illustrate how badly astray one could go, Dr. Campbell, a Canadian astronomer, as it happens, back in 1941 was irked at all the talk about man going to the moon from the science fiction writers, you see. He was going to show that was nonsense. So he published a paper in a scientific journal. And he calculated the required initial launch weight to get a man to the moon and back. Well, that's a proper question. How big does the darn thing have to be? Pages of equations. Bottom line, it would have to weigh 1 million tons. Ha! How ridiculous, he said. What he did was make all possible stupid assumptions. And to make a long story short, the right answer is 3,000 tons as opposed to 1 million. Was he stupid? No, he just didn't know what he was talking about. He was ignorant. He hadn't looked at any of the published studies. He assumed a single-stage rocket, a limit of 1G acceleration. You got to use a retro rocket to slow you down. We don't. Remember Apollo 13? You better get the angle right coming into the atmosphere. But no retro rocket, which is dead weight, of course, and a whole bunch of other things. Like, let's use the gravitational field of the moon. It's there. Let's launch at the right time so that the moon will come along and pull us in. Freebie! All our deep space probes use gravitational assist. That's a freebie.
Mm-hmm.
And we use it several times on the same flights. The spacecraft that's out at Saturn now, Cassini, we sent it closer to the sun to go past Venus, to give it a kick to send it past Earth, to give it another kick to send it past Jupiter, which gave it another kick. These are all freebies.
Wow.
You know, being smart is more important than being powerful.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not a deep concept when you think about it. Most of us will ski down the hill. We don't climb down the hill, do we? You know?
Exactly. Stan?
I enjoy these things.
Yes, you do, and I must say you are extremely good at them. I love watching you debate some of these what I call ding dongs, because a lot of them are just that. I'm sorry, they're ding dongs. So, Stan, we're getting low on time here, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about SETI in particular. What's on your mind about SETI?
Well, because they have convinced the world that the only way we're going to find alien life is to listen for radio signals, which is one of those stupid assumptions. Our first long-distance radio signal was transmitted in 1901, picked up in Newfoundland. So we're going to say that nobody out there has a more advanced technology, or they're stuck at our level. They'll make it easy for us to pick them up. They'll use our technology. I don't use a slide rule anymore. Why would they use a primitive technique like ours? That's one thing. Second, they totally ignore the UFO evidence. They're not interested in extraterrestrial intelligence. They're interested in picking up in job security for people listening for signals using the best radio telescopes we can find. That's not what searching for extraterrestrial intelligence is all about.
Yeah.
They ignore the relevant evidence. They ignore, you know, once you had enough reports of radar observations, multiple witness radar visual cases, you're going to say everybody is lying? How dare they?
Yeah.
You know, they don't know anything about the cases. And look at their references. I read their books. They don't read mine.
Pretty egotistical yes. On their part.
Well, they'd be out of a job if they were to say, hey, look, we've been doing the wrong thing for all these years. Okay, guys, find us a job someplace else doing something useful.
Yeah, but, I've never even thought about that. And the fact that you brought that up, they're looking for these radio signals.
Why would anybody
and our first one was 1901. So.
Yeah, I mean, why would anybody send us a radio signal? Who are they talking to?
I don't know, It's that alien beat playing 24 hours a day here on KK Saturn or whatever.
Well, it's kind of funny. Any advanced civilization is going to send signals from a system that isn't on a planet, so it can stay in the same position with regard to your target. If a planet is rotating, you can't aim at your target for very long.
Wow, that's amazing. I just find that absolutely amazing. I've never even thought of that. And these are the things. You got to
read my book.
I guess so, because I tell you, I guess. So I'm assuming you feel, as I do, that the money being spent on SETI could be much better allocated.
Well, that amount of money devoted to ufology would produce results. We've already got plenty of data. We need more organization.
Yeah.
There have only been a dozen PhD theses done about UFOs. There's room for a lot more. But look, to be honest, SETI isn't spending lots of money. Tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And that's not a lot of money. Like I said, when I worked on nuclear airplanes, we spent $100 million in 1 year in 1958, when that was a lot of money. So, that's not what I'm objecting to. It's these smart people pretending that they're looking for extraterrestrial intelligence when they're not. You remember the cartoon of the cop finds a drunk crawling around on the ground under the street light? What are you doing down there? I'm looking for my keys, officer. Well, where'd you lose them? Well, down there where the car is. Why are you looking here? Well, because that's where there's more light.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's a good analogy.
I'm not a comedian.
Yeah. Give you a little rim shot there. Stan, one thing that we're starting here at Topic UFO here in Season 4 is I'm trying to allow the viewers to send in their questions, and I'll pick one, and that lucky person gets to have their question asked of the guest. And tonight's question is from Darren Willett from Stoke-on-Trent, England. And he writes, Dear Mr. Friedman, because there have been so many different sizes and shapes of UFOs sighted throughout history, do you think it's possible that this could mean we are being visited by multiple different planets, galaxies, universes, and/or dimensions?
Well, I would leave out the universes and the dimensions and the galaxies and all of that. Let's remember that within 50 light years of here, there are 1,000 stars. So within 1,000 light years, there's 8 million stars. The galaxy's 100,000 light years across, give or take 10,000 light years. So I don't worry about the other galaxies. Andromeda's 2 million light years away. Who cares? But I agree with the hypothesis. I think it's every bit as complicated as looking down at the traffic on a turnpike. There are big vehicles and small vehicles and multiple wheels, the 28-wheelers and four-wheelers and even I guess you can't have two-wheelers on the freeway. But, so, yeah, I think, you see, my vision is that there's life all over the place out there. And what people also want to leave out is what we found as discussed and captured. Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli, the base stars in the Betty Hill star map,
yes.
And there's a whole chapter on it in the book. Anyway, those two stars, they're only 39.3 light years from here, which is just down the street. But from each other, they're only an eighth of a light year apart. That's 30 times closer to each other than we are to the next star over. Wow. We're out in the boondocks. These guys got next-door neighbors, and in addition, those two stars are a cool billion years older than the sun. So you see what I'm saying is I think there are civilizations all over the place. And Kepler backs that up. There are planets all over the place. And so the notion that, we're the lone ones out there and ain't nobody around within sight, the place is probably teeming with life. And I would suspect the sizes vary with the gravitational field on the planets, but we also have to leave room for colonization and migration. I check my audiences. Most of the people in my audiences, their great-great-great-great-grandfather did not live in that area. Somebody migrated from someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few indigenous, and but still. So I think, yes, there are many different types. I think there's a galactic federation. I think the major reason for coming here is to quarantine us because the thinking people, beings, okay, let's not call them people, beings, recognize that we're a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare.
Yeah.
Killing the number of people we did in World War I, 60 million people, and destroying 1,700 cities. Does that sound like activity of a civilization? It's very hard to say that, oh, yeah, all civilizations are like that. If they are, they don't last very long, frankly.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, Stan, we are at the end of the show, but I wanted to ask you what's on the near horizon for you? Speaking engagements, books, lectures, what you got going on? Where people can...
First thing is in Del Rio, Texas. These are all listed at my website, www.stantonfriedman.com.
Okay.
And in Del Rio, Texas, there's a conference. There'll be several speakers. Travis Walton is one. I'm speaking the 23rd, of January, the 25th of January, sorry. But it's listed on my website. I've also got 2 tours coming up that include the Trinity site where the first atom bomb was exploded.
Oh.
It's a historical facility, so they have to make it available. So 2 days a year it's open to the public. One in April, one in October on a Saturday. And I'll be leading a tour that goes to there, to Los Alamos, fascinating place, and to Roswell, another fascinating place.
Oh, neat.
And so that'll be fun, and it gives the information on my website. I'm also speaking at Roswell, of course, this year. I do almost every year. First week in July, the 4th, 5th, 6th or so, probably be giving 3 or 4 lectures. There are a bunch of speakers there. Kathleen Marden, my associate, will be speaking there, too. And then the MUFON conference, which will be, well, just outside Philadelphia, also in July, but a little later. Let's see, about the 19th or so of July, 18th through the 20th. Again, it's on the website, www.stantonfriedman.com.
Yes.
And, there'll be other things coming up, and I'll put them on the website as they happen. There is talk now of another conference in Exeter, New Hampshire, at the end of August, Labor Day weekend, where that famous case incident at Exeter took place. And I've spoken, they didn't have one last year, but I've spoken at a couple of ones they've had in the past, and there'll be a number of speakers. It'll be fun.
How many engagements do you do approximately every year?
Well, it varies from 20 to 90. My busiest lecture tour, I did 25 lectures in 35 days in 15 states. That's when I was young.
Yeah, rock star ufologist.
Well, I get such a nice response that I enjoy it. Now, there are 2 special characteristics you need, and I have them. You got to have a cast iron stomach and a cast iron throat. Well, I'll tell you, it's work. And, I hear people saying, isn't it great you get to travel so much? It's work.
Yeah.
Sorry, I live in Fredericton, New Brunswick. We don't have any direct flights to the United States. You got to go through Montreal, Toronto, whatever. So you don't just get on a plane. It's not like L.A. to anywhere.
Well, not even anymore. I mean, air travel ever since after 9/11, I'm sorry, but it is no fun. Business or pleasure,
right.
Doesn't matter. It is.
Yeah.
The fun has been taken out of it.
Yes.
So.
So I'm glad I'm strong enough to handle it. And the end of November, I did 5 days in Brazil, home for 2 days, and then 4 days in Finland. That was, it was 85 degrees in Brazil, and it was snowing in Finland, of course.
That's always a nice thing for your body to go through. Yeah. Yeah. It's work is what I'm saying. I enjoy it. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying anybody who thinks, oh, what great fun you get to travel. Come on. Well, I tell you, I have had the chance to see you speak live, and it was fantastic. I recommend anyone watching that really wants to know the facts. Go see Mr. Friedman.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, Stan, thank you for taking time and speaking with us tonight. Like I said, I've waited 2 years to have you on the show because I simply did not want to invite you until I felt the show was mature enough and had the appropriate audience. And I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your night.
My pleasure.
All right.
We'll do it again.
All right.
Sooner than 2 years.
Okay, very good. Stan, you have a great evening, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you much.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Open the door, you'll find the secret. To find the answer is to keep it.